When did American law enforcement officers become the thought police? This should shock every American, whether we support or oppose Netanyahu's slaughter. Reagan said countries across the globe are turning to free markets and free speech and turning away from the ideologies of the past. Mitch McConnell talked about this. I mean, here we are. This is Franz Kafka's world. The opening sentence of the trial, that, Kafka's most famous novel, starts out, someone must have slandered Joseph K. For one morning, without having done anything truly wrong, he was arrested. As George Orwell noted in his novel 1984, he said, the thought police are always watching. The only safe way was to think nothing, to know nothing, to believe nothing. Border agents are thought police is the title. When did words become a crime? And it opens with a quote from Ben Franklin. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. I mentioned this yesterday. I wanted to do a deeper dive into it, which is why I wrote this piece and why I want to talk about it now. The Trump administration refused to allow an Australian writer entry into the United States recently because he'd penned articles on his personal blog. He's got this Substack blog, critical of the Trump administration's support for Netanyahu's policies in Gaza. Now, we can debate Gaza policy all day long. There's a wide variety of opinions on this, and this has nothing to do with that, frankly. This should shock every American, whether we support or oppose Netanyahu's slaughter in Gaza, for lack of a better word. As George Orwell noted in his novel 1984, he said, the thought police are always watching. The only safe way was to think nothing, to know nothing, to believe nothing. Are we there yet? I mean, throughout my lifetime, American politicians of both parties have been outspoken in defending the right of people to speak their minds, regardless of their positions. American politicians have been, literally through my whole entire life, fond of quoting the famous saying that's misattributed to Voltaire. It was actually written by his biographer. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And, elected officials from Lincoln to Goldwater to Reagan have pointed out that our First Amendment right of free speech is the bedrock of the American ethos. A strong nation that believes in its principles doesn't need to be afraid of criticism. In fact, isn't afraid of criticism. If anything, the embrace of dissent is the steel and the spine of American democracy. Our First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Yet we now have officials who are examining the writings of people flying into the United States and using those writings when they're critical of Donald Trump or his friends, in this case Netanyahu, to harass travelers or even deny them entry into our country. Alastair Kitchen is the 33-year-old Australian writer who got bumped off, or not bumped off, he flew from Melbourne into Los Angeles, and when he arrived in Los Angeles, he got picked up and questioned for 9 hours about his position on the war in Gaza, which we are not a party to, and then put on a plane back to Melbourne, back to Australia. They denied him entry. This is a guy who had spent 6 years in New York City going to Columbia University, where he got his master's degree. He was on his way into the United States for a 2-week visit to New York to visit his friends from the 6 years he spent in New York. This is just nuts. He said, this is a quote, he told The Guardian, he said, the CPB, the Customs and Border Patrol, explicitly said to me, the reason you've been detained is because of your writing on the Columbia student protests. And he had taken all this stuff down before he got on the plane. He thought, deleting his social media posts might be enough to keep him safe. Turns out, well, this is what he said. He said, clearly they had technology in their system which linked those posts to my visa a long time before I took them down, because they knew all about the posts and then interrogated me about the posts. Once I was there, they'd already prepared a file on me and knew everything about me. He told The Guardian that his willingness to speak to The Guardian left him, quote, frankly terrified of retribution and reprisal from the U.S. government. And I'm guessing that this is true of more than just Alastair Kitchen. I'm guessing that there are multiple foreign people who have tried to come into the United States and been stopped at our borders and turned back. It's just that most of them are terrified of speaking to the press. I mean, this is a growing pattern. Hassan Piker is an American who was born here. He was detained for hours. The guy his ancestry is Turkish, but he's an American. He was born here. And he's got over 4 million followers on YouTube and Twitch. And he was stopped for hours and questioned about his political beliefs by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. He told the Times, quote, "They straight up tried to get me to get something out of me that I think they could use to basically detain me permanently." Amir Makhlid is an American-born attorney who represented one of the University of Michigan students protesting Israeli policy in Gaza. And he was detained when flying into Detroit with his wife and kids from a spring break vacation, an April vacation in the Dominican Republic. And as he was going through customs, the agent called for the tactical terrorism response team. He says, "My heart fell into my stomach at that point. I was so concerned and worried." They released him after 90 minutes of interrogation, but when did American law enforcement officers become the thought police? I mean, what's going on with this? I don't get it. Jeremy, there's somebody at the door, maybe downstairs. He was recently Republican Kathy McMorris Rogers, the House Energy and Commerce Committee chair, was the lead author of a letter titled "Free Speech is Foundational to America." And this is what the Republican Congresswoman, Kathy McMorris Rogers, she's the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, she said, "The answer to speech that we disagree with should always be more speech." I mean, this is what Abe Lincoln said. The right to say wise things necessarily implies the right to say foolish things, but the answer to foolish speech is wise speech and not force. Reagan said countries across the globe are turning to free markets and free speech and turning away from the ideologies of the past. Mitch McConnell talked about this. I mean, here we are. This is Franz Kafka's world. The opening sentence of the trial, Kafka's most famous novel, starts out, "Someone must have slandered Joseph K. For one morning, without having done anything truly wrong, he was arrested." Right. Travelers are being stopped at our borders, not for criminal acts, but for the crime of speaking out. So, this is wild stuff. Check it out. It's 15 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned.